Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We're currently in Module 9. In this lesson, we're going to be covering the room search page on our web application. So, your homework is to create a page that will allow the user to search for and see the available room types. Wire it up to the class library so it actually works. Okay, so we've already designed this page. Yep, it was a rough design, but now we're going to put it into practice. So go back to the use step of our design process, look at what we built for this page, and then put it into Razor Pages. Okay, so that's your homework. Go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, so I'm assuming that you are done. You've got that page up and working. Let's see how I would do it. So in our pages, I'm going to create a brand new page. So right click on Pages and say Add Razor Page. And I'll do it right in the root. That's fine. And I'm going to say Razor Page. And before I do, let's just look real quick. So pages, the path for a page is based upon its location. So if I were to put a folder in here called, I don't know, test, and then I put a page inside of that, the path would be my URL/test/ the page name. So in this case, since they're under the root, /index and /privacy are right after the URL. So URL/privacy is going to be this page right here. Now it doesn't include the .cs HTML. So if you did want to have some type of URL structure that is a little more complicated, you could do that using this structure. So you can create folders as needed and they'll show up in your path. You can then move them around and your page path will change depending on where it's located. So let's right click on Pages and say Add Razor Page, a regular Razor Page, not Entity Framework or Entity Framework CRUD. We just want a blank Razor Page, hit Add, and we're going to call this Book Search. We do want to generate the page model class, which is that class that kind of powers it. It's technically the view model in our MVVM structure. Now, a simpler way of thinking of this is it's the code behind for our page. It's not quite the same thing as a code behind, but it's close enough for our purposes. We don't want this to be a partial view. A partial view would be a bit of HTML and code that would sit in a larger page. And we do want to reference the script libraries, which they're already checked for us, and we do want to use a layout page, but we want to leave it blank to let Razor use the _viewStart file. We'll look at that in just a minute. So let's hit Add. And this is going to scaffold out the project, and it may take a couple of minutes the first time it does this, because it's downloading NuGet packages and setting up our application for use with Razor Pages. Yes, I know you already have Razor Pages, but doing this actually does take a little bit more work. So now that it's done, let's look real quick at the shared folder and also the view start. So it said to use the view start as the default, which view start just says layout equals _layout. Well, _layout's in shared, and that is the actual page. So this is the page that gets rendered every time we view a Razor Pages file, unless we choose to override the default master page, or the default page that kind of powers the entire thing. Because as you've noticed probably, if we look at the privacy page, there's not a lot to this web page. If you're familiar at all with HTML and CSS, you know that's not a complete HTML page. It's just a few pieces. Whereas the rest of it, it's in that _layout page. This is where we have the HTML at the top, and the head, and the body. Notice the style sheets are here, and then down below we'll have some scripts. These are normal things you would see on a web page. But then right down here on line 34, it says @render body. And this razor page, room search. That sounds a little better. Makes a whole lot more sense in a hotel context rather than book search. So there's our code behind or our page model. And there is the room search page. We'll put a space there. We'll put a space in our view data for our title as well. So there we go. So we have a room search page. What do you want to see on this page? Well, we're going to want to have a form. And that form is going to have a couple of pieces of data. It's going to have a start date and end date. Now, just to verify, when we come over here to our data in our class library, and let's do a collapse here. So I'm going to go to outlining and say collapse to definitions here so I can see just the definitions of my methods. Note that get available room types has a start date and end date are the two things it takes in. And then it gives us back a list of room type model, the room types that are available. So with that, that's all we need in order to get back our room types. So that's all we need to have on our page, which is what we designed when we designed our little form. So let's create a form. Now in the form, we're going to have a couple of date pickers or date boxes. So div class equals form dash group. Now where am I getting this stuff from? Well, if you go to the Get Bootstrap page and look for a form, I'm going to use exactly what they use for an example as my form. That way it's going to look okay. It won't look amazing, but it'll look fine. And at the same time, it's something that's a known quantity. We can make it better down the road. This is again as an MVP. So we're going to have a label. And the label is going to be AS. Well, firstly, I'm not going to put 4 and all the rest because I have a problem here. What's the ASP-4 for? All right. So I'm going to have a field for my start date and a field for my end date. Where do I get those from? Well, let's close these other things out. And we go to our code behind or our page model. And we're going to put them in here. So prop, date, time, and this is going to be start date and date, time, end date. So a start and end date for when we are going to actually want to search for a row. With that, we can come back here now and say label and say, let's just go to the end here and say label ASP-4 equals model dot start date. Okay, and that's going to create a label for us for start date. Now we're going to create an input box and say type equals, and let's do date. Type equals date, and ASP-4 is model dot start date. So it's the same thing as input for the start date. And that should be pretty much all we need to do. We could put a placeholder data here. We're not going to. I'm going to copy this and do the exact same thing for end date. So this would be end date. End date. To pop up that IntelliSense menu, Control-J. And that gives you your menu you can pick from. That's easier than typing out and mistyping something. And then finally, we're going to have a button with type equals submit. And we'll say that this is a class equals btn-primary, just like the example says on the Bootstrap website. And we'll say search instead of submit. Now that's a pretty simple form, but we do need to have a method on here equals post. That'll make sure it's a post method when it calls into our page model. So now let's go to our page model and create a post method here. Room search for now. We could probably call it search for room or make it the main page or whatever. For now, this is fine. Let's run this. So we should have something going on, and we'll put a breakpoint in our method. So on posts, we're going to put a breakpoint right here where we can inspect the start date and end date. So there's our page. Let's go to room search. We have two dates. So let's do a date picker here, and wow, that's date 0001. That's not great. How about 2019? And now let's say, okay, it's January. Let's go over to December. We should probably default this to something like today's date. We can type in here too, so let's just do that for this one. 1219. So we have 4-day range, 1215 to 1219. Sounds good. Let's click search. And it comes here. And if we go to our locals window and look at this, the end date is incorrect. And so is the start date. So my guess is that this has to do with the fact, let's stop us for a minute, that we said type equals date. Let's just take that off briefly and let ASP-4 choose a type for us. Because it should do that based upon our type of our data. Come over here and go room search. Now it's date and time, which is not what we want, but it does give us a clue as to the fact that there is an issue here with what these types are. So let's add a modifier here. So data type, control dot to add a using statement for system.componentModel.data annotations. And we're going to say the data type dot date. So this is just a date. Let's do this for both of these. And let's run this again. And see if we get a different result now that we're letting it decide what those types should be, but also saying, hey, they're just a date. And yes, that looks better. So let's just put a date in here. So 12/15/2019 and then 12/19/2019. Oops. That'd be a long stay. 2019. And hit search. And now if we look at this, we'll see that we still have the wrong date time. We have nothing here. is it will say, okay, are you looking to check in today and check out tomorrow? And if so, you're all set. You just hit search. But if you want to change the date, no problem. Do the drop down. I want to say, oh, I want to start the 16th and I want to check out the 20th or so. All right, so that makes it a lot easier than starting from year one, which is kind of ridiculous. Now, there is validation that should be put in place, and that's going to be something we put on the list. And this is, you've got to keep a running list of all the features that you want to add, but don't actually do them. Just put them on a list for after you're done your MVP. So one of the features we should add is that whenever you have a start date, it should always set the end date to one after it if the end date is before the start date. Okay, so if they select a start date of now that we have this, now we need to actually wire this up to our class library where we have get available room types. So the available room type, let's grab this. This is a list of room type model. Let's copy this. If we come back over here, let's create a place for this. So prop and list of room type model, and that's going to be available room types. Hit enter. Control dot here to add our using statement for our models. That's what we want, and by default that will be null. So we'll leave it alone for now. But over here, what we're going to do is we're going to populate this. Actually, not even on post. Because on post, the problem here is that if we populate it and then redirect us back to the same page, it will wipe it out. So what we're going to do is for these properties, we're going to say that we supports get equals true. Because we're going to post right back to the same form, because that was our goal, was to have it on one page. And then we're going to populate the list if these are not empty. The only problem is they're always not empty because date time now and date time now add days 1. Now we could just do a search every time and no worries, that would work. Or what we can do is we can create a new property and call this search complete or search enabled. I think that works. And then call this a bind property and supports get equals true. Now by default, and I'll verify this by making sure or by being clear on this, but by default it'll be false. So if search enabled equals true, then we're going to do our search. Okay, so now we have to address this down here, which is the on post. Instead of just returning page, which gives us a brand new page of this room search, we're going to say return redirect to page. And one of the options is number 2, where it says give me some route values. Well, new anonymous class. You've seen this before. I'm going to set search enabled equals true. I'm going to pass in the start date and the end date. Now, I'm not giving property names for start date and end date because they're going to match the property name that already is. I've only given the property name here because they have to pass in a data instance. Control dot to add a using statement. I'm going to call this DB. So control dot here to create and initialize a field for this. So it's going to do this assignment here, and then up at the top you'll see private read-only iDatabase data underscore DB. This is going to ask dependency injection for this iDatabase data, which you've already established is going to give me back a instance of SQL data, which I can use. So down here, underscore DB dot, and I have multiple things. Get available room types is what I want to do. So get available room types, and I pass in my start date and my end date. And that gives me back a list of room type model, which I can just do right here. So the return of list of room type model goes into available room types. Now pause for a minute. Think this through. I've just done data access in ASP.NET Core Razor Page web application. But I didn't actually talk to the database. I didn't touch the database. I didn't configure Dapper. None of that stuff. That's all done in the class library, which is done once. And now my quote-unquote data access is just ask for it. I don't have to worry about what's happening here, or even now don't panic. This is the first thing that younger developers especially will tend to do. Younger meaning newer in the field. Is whenever you get an exception, you think that's a horrible thing. And it's not a horrible thing. It just means that you've got a problem that you need to address. Having problems you need to address is pretty much the entire job description for being a software developer. So don't panic and try to get out of the problem. Try and learn from this and grow from this. And one of the things you can learn and grow from is the idea that exceptions give you information about what the problem is. So don't just say, oh no, I have a problem. Look at what the problem is. When you ask for help, which you shouldn't ask for help yet, but when you ask for help, you're going to want to know the exception message, where it was in the code, what's going on, what the data was that you're passing in, all this information. So in this case, the connection string property has not been initialized. So the connection string is null. Well, the problem has nothing to do with the query. The problem has to do with the connection string. because you can't connect to a database if the connection string says null. So let's come back up here to figure out where we created the connection string. Well, let's right up here. So underscore config.get connection string. The connection string name is SQLDB. Okay. And that returned a null. So why is that? Well, let's hit stop and think this through. It's looking for a connection string called SQLDB. Let's open up appsettings.json of our web application. Do you see connection strings in here? Why, no, you don't. Now you do. And do you see one called SQLDB? Now you do. And what's our connection string to our database? Well, let's go to SQL Server Object Explorer, open this up, open up our databases, and look for our hotel app DB. Right click and go to properties. One of the nice things about local DB is that the connection string is right here. Double click on it to and then copy it and paste it in here. And guess what? That's your connection string. There's the source. There's the initial catalog, also known as the database. Integrated security equals true means it's going to use your login for security, not a login name and password. It's going to use whoever's logged onto the computer, which is fine. Now that should solve that problem. Do we have more? Maybe. We're going to find out. Let's run it again. Room search. 15 to 20. Search. We hit the breakpoint. Let's expand this out. Available room types. Count equals 3. That's promising. Let's expand out the room types. The executive suite is available for $205 a night. The 2 queen size beds is available for $115 a night. And the king size bed is available for $100 per night. So we're getting 3 different types back. That's awesome. That's exactly what we want. Let's hit stop. So now we know that we are getting value back if we do a search and we're getting data back from the database. Now let's actually display that data. So let's close down some of these other things we don't need to have open. And let's go to our room search page. And below the form, let's do an H2 tag and say results. And then down here, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out and put a div in here with a class name of results. Whether or not there's a item in this list. So I'm actually going to wipe this out again and say if model.results, nope, what's it called? It's called available room types. Available room types question mark dot count is greater than 0. Okay, so this question mark here says if this is null, this available room types, don't even look for the count because it's null, therefore don't even go there. And then it's going to fail. So it's going to fail the if. So we're going to say only make the if successful if the count is greater than 0. If the count is 0 or if this is null, either way, don't do this if. Well, in here, I'm going to say H2 results, and I'm going to have a for each room in model dot available room types. I know there's rooms in here because it's not null and the count is greater than 0. Now I could have just said if it's not null and not worry about the count, except for the fact that then it would show results, the H2 tag, and no actual results. I don't want that. So now inside of for each, what we can do is we can say, let's display each room type. And actually, I think I'm going to use a table for this. So let's do a table right above, and then we'll put this for each inside of it. So table class equals table. And then we can say we'll have a T head. So it's T head and T body. T head as the header. And we'll have a row inside there and a TH for each individual header. So let's look at available room types. So let's go over here and hit F12. We have the ID, don't care about it. We have a title and description. Let's put just the title and the price. That's all we care about. Or maybe we'll put description down below the title. So let's call this room type. And then we'll have TH for price. And we'll have one more for that will leave empty for the title of it. But it'll be where we have the button to actually book it. So that's the header. So think of this like Excel. So these are the first three columns in like cell or row 1. And that way we can say, okay, these are the headers, and now let's create the body of our table. T body, and then what we'll do is our inside of our for each, so we'll cut this out and put it here. Now in here what we'll do is we'll create a row. And inside this row, what we're going to have is data. And so for room type, what we'll have is at room dot title. And let's do this. Let's kind of format this a little bit better. The cool thing about HTML is the formatting you can play around with and change. So I'm going to say, let's make this into just strong for now. I'll put this at the end. I should have wrapped this thing and said strong, but that's okay. There we go. Now it's wrapped. And then I'll put a break at the end of it. And then I will have at room.description. So right on top of each other, title and description. And then I'm going to have another column. And my second column is price. So let's do the data, and we'll just say at room.price. And then finally we have that button, which for right now, what we're going to do is just leave it alone. Let's just put a link here. href equals empty string. And let's call this the book now link. Okay. No URL here yet. We haven't figured that out yet. Don't worry about that. But it'll at least be a placeholder. Now, let's see if this works in action. Might be a little ugly, but we'll figure it out. So it's starting up. We've got Kestrel started, and now our web application is started. Room search. No values yet. So let's go to the 12th, and let's go to the 16th, and hit search. And the results are a king-size bed, 2 queen-size beds. Let's zoom in a little bit here. 2 queen-size beds, and an executive suite. The prices are kind of ugly, not formatted for money yet, but that looks pretty slick. Now it did wipe out our date and times here. That's kind of ugly. We need to fix that. We're going to put that in a bug list, not on the to-do right now, because this is actually working the way you want it to. But that is something to think through. Now, the other thing we could do is we could hide this section when results are showing. So that's a possibility we could think through. But I think that for right now, this is fine. I would like to add some more space there. But again, this is working the way it is. So let's do one quick fix, which is this price here. Yes, it's a price, but it's dot price. And that should take care of it for us. Let's find out. While I'm here, I'm going to put in a really simple little break just to have one extra line between the above and the below. Let's run again, make sure that this gives us what we're expecting, and then we'll call it good on this form. So let's say 15 to 20. Do a search. There's our dollar amounts. There's a little extra space. And it's looking pretty slick. I kind of like it. So that's just about all for this form. Now we haven't hooked up the Book Now buttons. And the reason why is because we don't have a place to send people. How are they going to book a room when we don't have the page for it yet? So we're going to leave this href here alone. We're going to link to the actual page once we create that page, but that's in the next lesson. So with that, I think we're going to call this form good, and we can move on to the next lesson where we add that page to actually book a room.